Problems are all around us, and problem solving is central to our success in life and leadership. As problem solvers, the goal is to minimize the occurrence of problems, which means we have to be courageous enough to tackle problems head on before circumstances force our hand. Let's begin with the belief that all problems are solvable, even the ones that seem most stubborn. Using the problem-solving model, you can cultivate the tools and experiences necessary to understand the impact of a problem, dream up tons of ideas, and create innovative solutions to meet actual needs. Before you begin the task of identifying and solving problems, let's take a minute to define some important terms. Problem solving is the process of finding alternatives and applying one best solution. A problem is a complex issue needing to be overcome. Alternatives are available possibilities to overcome a problem. A solution is the best possible alternative to solve a problem. Every problem is unique, but the techniques for solving problems don't have to be reinvented each time you face a dilemma. Adopting a methodical approach to problem solving will help you build effective problem solving skills so you're equipped to meet new challenges that you encounter. Problem solving has these 5 basic steps: discover, investigate, brainstorm, implement, and review. First, discover. This is where you identify the problem. It's our first step in the problem-solving model. The second step in the model is investigate, where you gather information to define the problem. Our third step is brainstorm, where we produce as many alternatives as possible. Step 4 is implement, putting the one best solution into effect. And finally, step 5 is review, where we assess the effects of the solution. So, how are problems solved? Using this problem-solving model, you'll find activities designed to maximize your efforts and guide you through the decisions and resources you need to successfully carry out each step of the problem-solving model. The Discover step, step 1, is all about identifying the problem. The discovery step is all about preparation, being open-minded to understand the problem and the possibilities before you. The human mind needs to sort data into categories in order to perceive it. This causes you to create borders to your thinking where none exist. Within these borders, there's often no solution. When you find yourself facing a dilemma or a dead end, it appears unsolvable from inside the walls. You may realize that something's not working, but you're not able to put your finger on it. Before you can solve a problem, you need to recognize the obstacles preventing you from reframing the borders that confine your thinking. Only when you manage your bias, build creative confidence, and empathize will you be able to be in the best position to identify the complex issues needing to be overcome. Our brain creates shortcuts to be more efficient. But these shortcuts can cause you to misunderstand or misjudge circumstances. As problem solvers, you need to recognize this bias and do something about it so that you can be more effective in your problem solving. Let's take a look at managing bias. Learn to adapt when your brain makes quick judgments. Bias happens when your brain makes quick judgments. Without knowing it, you'll jump to conclusions and fill in the blanks upon your past experiences. While there can be circumstances where these conclusions are correct, this is not always the case. You might assume that you have the answers, but you've misjudged the situation. Everyone has bias, and it's best for problem solvers to learn to manage it. Every second, our brains receive 11 million pieces of information. However, science shows us that our brain can only consciously process 40 pieces of information. So, you create shortcuts in your unconscious to quickly assess situations and act. This is called unconscious bias. The DIA model is easy to implement and helps us manage our bias. When faced with a problem, simply apply 3 actions. Describe the situation, interpret it from yours and others' perspectives, and adapt with creative behavior. First, describe. We describe the behaviors and actions that we see. Be careful not to let your personal judgment influence what you observe. This is simply what's going on in the situation. For example, he interpreted me rudely can be restated neutrally as he asked me a question before I finished what I was saying. You're describing what happened. Interpret. Be aware of how you might interpret the situation differently from someone else. Try to interpret the behavior and actions from two perspectives. From a perspective of self-awareness, how do I see the situation? And from a perspective of others' understanding, how do others see the situation? Adapt. Once you feel you have a pretty good understanding of the behaviors and actions you've observed, begin to think through ways to navigate the situation. You'll get stuck in the interpret stage from time to time. You'll jump to assumptions. Then you'll need to backtrack to describe the facts. It's all part of the process, just simply move back to the description step. Next, build creative confidence. Creative confidence is all about the willingness to try and fail, but it takes practice. Being creative opens you up to new discoveries and helps you formulate more innovative possibilities. Creative confidence means that you have the courage to take creative risks, the willingness to learn from your mistakes, and the knowledge that all the ideas you create have value. At its core, creative confidence is about believing in your capacity to influence the world around you. It's the conviction that you can achieve what you set out to do. Creative confidence will inspire you to make things, test them out, and get it wrong, and then keep working on it. Anyone can grow in this creative confidence if you just believe the truth. Creative learning and growth are possible. Take the time to encourage your creativity as you approach solving a problem. As you develop confidence to be creative yourself, you can then use that creativity to see the world from another person's perspective. Next, develop empathy. Empathy is the ability to take in the world from another person's perspective, put words to their feelings, and anticipate their unmet needs. Problem solving begins with empathy, understanding the unmet needs of people. Empathy is often understood as figuratively taking a walk in someone else's shoes. By seeing things from the perspective of those with the problem, you can start to see a clear picture of what's going wrong. Putting yourself in the other person's shoes, taking the time to really understand his or her point of view, whether you agree with it or not, is what empathy is all about. When you get curious about real people, you spark fresh thinking on how to make their world better. Here are 3 things to consider when observing others. Look for adaptations. Adaptations are hacks or workarounds that people come up with to make something work better for themselves. What does the adaptation tell you about their needs? Look for body language. People smile when they're delighted and slouch when they're tired or detached. Interpreting people's nonverbal language is an easy way to gauge their needs and better understand them. Look for patterns. Pay attention when people repeat stories or actions. You might uncover themes or routines, both of which can point to underlying needs or values. Then you can follow up with why. When gathering inspiration, you can use many approaches to explore needs, desires, and motivations of people. Observation is particularly effective when you immerse yourself in the environment where the complex issue originates. There, you can hear the voices of those impacted or experience the day how it actually unfolds. Managing bias, building creative confidence, and developing empathy ignite your ability to identify problems. Step 2 of our problem-solving model, investigate, is where we gather information to define the problem. Much of the effort of problem-solving involves understanding what the underlying issues really are. Look for root causes, related information, ideas, risks, costs, and benefits associated with problems. Defining the real problem is the first major milestone on the way to a solution. It frequently takes as much time to identify and understand the problem as it does to solve it. When you investigate a problem, it's important to identify a few key elements of the problem. Here are 3 tools to use as you go. First, you'll need to identify stakeholders. Who else does the problem impact? Who can help you gather information? These are the folks you should talk with to understand the nuances of the challenge. Stakeholders are those who are affected by your problem or whose involvement you need to resolve the matter. You need to identify them, listen to them, and involve them as you work. Their input is vital to your success as you investigate, so that you accurately define your problem. Incorrectly defining your problem will lead to you incorrectly brainstorming and implementing a solution that might not be effective. There are a number of stakeholders to consider. Let's take a look. The first are problem owners. Who are you solving the problem for? This is your problem owner. The answer might be you or someone else. When you solve a problem from another person or group, you assume the responsibility for developing a satisfactory solution for them. Problem solving is about working with or for others. Your interactions with managers, supervisors, clients, peers, and those directly involved or impacted by a problem is critically important to your problem-solving success. Allies. Problem solving works best when you have a talented group of allies from whom you can gain clarity and resources. A diverse mix of thinkers and doers who can contribute resources or offer perspective makes it easier to tackle any challenge. Think about engaging allies who represent a wide range of viewpoints, subject matter expertise, and who are disciplined enough to keep you accountable to your objectives. Then, find out if these allies are willing to be a sounding board for you as you gather information about your problem. Opponents. You may also encounter people who hinder your progress. These might be people who do not agree that a problem exists or who are resistant to new ideas. There are a few ways to approach opponents to your problem-solving efforts. First, create a sense of urgency about the problem you're identifying. The need for change has to be seen rather than explained to generate enough emotion to compel opponents to your direction. Another way to engage opponents is to make them part of the problem-solving process. Involve them in brainstorming alternatives to increase buy-in, communicate often, and celebrate successes along the way. Now that you've identified those who you may need to involve in the process, you can start by asking for input and listening carefully for clues and information that helps you define your problem. Active listening requires that the listener fully concentrate, understand, respond, and then remember what's being said. When engaging in active listening, remember these guidelines. Acknowledge verbally and non-verbally what the other person says. Do things like making eye contact, offering affirmations like "go on," and nodding your head as though you understand things. Invite them to say more about what happened or how they feel about it. Pay attention to nonverbal cues, facial expressions, body language, and even long pauses. When you listen for more than just the words being spoken, you can begin to interpret what the other person feels and make observations about their needs. The 5 Whys strategy is simple. It's an effective tool for uncovering the root of any problem. Start with your problem and ask why 5 times to pinpoint the processes that aren't working. By repeatedly asking why, you can get to the heart of any problem. Less structured than more traditional problem-solving methods, 5 Whys is just what it sounds like, asking why over and over to get to the root of an obstacle or a setback. Asking why sounds simple, but answering it requires thought and intelligent application. Search for answers that are grounded in fact. They must be accounts of things that have actually happened, not guesses at what might have happened. This technique encourages an open dialogue that can trigger new ideas about a problem, whether done individually or with a group. Each why piggybacks off the answer of the previous why by digging deeper. The last answer should point towards a process that's not working well or that's missing. Problem solvers formulate how might we statements to gather the insights and struggles from the investigation and positively reframe them. Define your problem with statements using 3 little words. The how is solutions-oriented, the might encourages optimism, and the we is collaborative. Use how might we statements as optimistic invitations to explore problems. The how might we approach to problem solving helps you innovate. You ask the right questions and use the power of language to help spark creative thinking and collaboration. How might we statements turn your challenges into opportunities? They're the culmination of gathering information about your problem. Some of the most successful organizations today are known for taking difficult, creative challenges by first asking, how might we improve X, or completely reimagine Y, or find a new way to accomplish Z. The how might we question opens you up to uncovering and reimagining the need before you. It defines your problem and asks a clear, concise, and captivating question about it. The how acknowledges that you do not yet have an answer and helps you explore a variety of alternatives instead of jumping to a conclusion. The might emphasizes that there's more than one right idea and inspires you forward towards the opportunity to find them. And finally, the we suggests that your efforts in solving important problems require teamwork and collective thinking. How might we statements start with the words how might we and finish with a phrase or a question relating to the problem. Again, this is a great tool to define your problems. The goal is to gather as much information as possible about the problem, so it's helpful to generate a number of how might we questions. There are 2 important questions to ask yourself about your how might we statement. First, does it allow for a variety of solutions? If it doesn't, try making it more broad. And second, is it narrow enough to let you know where you should start your brainstorming? If not, try adding some helpful boundaries. The how might we method is constructed in such a way that it opens the field for new ideas, admits that you do not currently know the answer, and encourages a collaborative approach to finding one. This is the best way to launch your brainstorming work. Identifying stakeholders, asking why 5 times, and how might we statements help you investigate problems. Brainstorming, which is step 3 of the problem-solving model, produces as many alternatives as possible. After you research a problem in step 1, discover, and collect data in step 2, investigate, start to consider alternatives and solutions. This creative phase of the problem-solving process requires imagination and intuition. Let's take a look at step 3, brainstorm. Remember that alternatives are the available possibilities to overcome a problem. You want to identify as many alternatives and ideas as you can. Your eventual solution is only as good as the set of options that you generate. Brainstorming is all about sharing ideas around a theme. The concept is simple. Get a few people together to think about a topic and capture the results. The idea is to embrace spontaneity, originality, and imagination. There are 3 steps to any brainstorming process: prepare, brainstorm, and review. We'll take a look in depth at each of them next. First, set the stage. You'll get the most out of your brainstorming session with the right pieces in place first. Gather equipment, set ground rules, and frame the questions to encourage the most creativity and openness with your team or brainstorming on your own. That's what preparation is all about. As a problem solver, preparing appropriately for brainstorming activities can go a long way to ensuring success. To develop stronger ideas, you should plan to guide a conversation so that the team doesn't narrow in on a solution before everyone has a chance to think. Being organized and strategic about the experience can help you generate natural and dynamic ideas. Here are some things you'll need to plan for. Participants. If you'll be brainstorming in a team or a group, think about which participants to include. Sometimes participants from outside your immediate team will bring different experiences and perspectives, looking at your problem differently. Location. Decide where you'll brainstorm. Ideally, brainstorming will take place in a venue outside your usual workspace. An outdoor space, such as a garden or a park, or a meeting room at a coffee shop or a library, might ignite more creativity. Even a conference room in another area of your building with sufficient space and a quiet atmosphere is a great choice. Equipment. What you need will vary depending on the method you choose to use. In general, you'll want your group to have post-it notes and pens or markers, and typically an easel or poster to which you post your ideas. If you're on your own, you might want to use a laptop or a notebook to capture your thoughts. There are even internet or application-based options if you're interested in exploring more technological approaches to a brainstorming session. Goals. Like in any process, planning for an achievable goal will set you up for success. Think about a goal in terms of quantity and timeline of your session. Will it be to get 100 ideas or spend 10 minutes listing different alternatives? Prompt. Finally, the most important way to set the stage for brainstorming is in the questions or statements that you'll be thinking about responses to. Define the question or problem for brainstorming, ensuring that it's appropriately challenging and relevant to your problem. A good question is indispensable for a good brainstorming session. Your "how might we" statements make a perfect brainstorming prompt. Post your question or prompt on the wall or in an easel, and you're ready to go with your brainstorming session. Responding to a specific problem or question, participants in a brainstorming session express their suggestions or ideas quickly and spontaneously, without much processed thought or reflection. In brainstorming, you'll generate a few ideas. It's that simple. There are many ways to brainstorm alternatives depending on your preferences and the makeup of your team. In general, to execute brainstorming, simply start thinking of alternatives. The goal of brainstorming is to examine complex issues and encourage broad idea generation. In a creative process such as brainstorming, it's important to first diverge, to think about what you're doing in as many new ways as possible. Then you'll want to converge on a small number of ideas to contemplate it in more detail. Brainstorming with a team is more effective with a few important guidelines in place. Review these reminders together before you begin to encourage creativity and the free flow of ideas. First, concentrate on quantity. Churn out as many ideas as you can as a group. Second, don't criticize others. All ideas are good ideas. Third, elaborate and build. Say yes and instead of but. Group brainstorming is just what it sounds like. Perhaps the most basic or commonly considered brainstorming technique, group brainstorming is simply getting your group together to come up with ideas. Once you've prepared, your team should start by jotting down their own ideas on post-it notes as they come to them. Writing down as many ideas first can help engage reserved participants. Just simply ask everyone to write one idea on one post-it note and then move on to the next. It also capitalizes on the variety of perspectives that you've gathered to think about options before one idea is shared, then that starts to influence thoughts of the rest of the group. When you've met your goal, everyone should share their ideas. Post the single post-it notes with one idea on the wall to create a visual collection of the group's thoughts. As you post them, you can categorize them to theme or develop categories around each idea. Consider bad ideas. Good ideas are great, but bad ones can be just as good. Those impossible, terrible, groan-worthy ideas open the imagination and help us to get in touch with creativity. Play is key to innovation, and bringing play into work means creating space to discover, fail, and try out new ideas. That's why we should consider bad ideas. In brainstorming, bad ideas can spark shifts in the mindset and lead to creative solutions we wouldn't otherwise have uncovered. Another variation on brainstorming in a small group is the group passing technique. This technique requires the team to build off one another's ideas. It's pretty simple. Each person should be given a blank sheet of paper. They start by writing one idea on that paper and then passing it to the person to the right. The paper or the person continues to move to the right, expanding on or giving a new idea based on that previous idea or some new creative thought. Group passing works well because after reviewing the idea contributed by the person on the right, each participant can either add a second new idea or flesh out that first idea in different or greater detail. Repeat this cycle for as many people as are participating, or another number of rounds that make sense for your group or problem statement. Mind mapping stems from another simple idea. Sometimes you need a visual representation of your thoughts to brainstorm ideas, see new connections, or retain information. Part of the challenge of brainstorming is trying to catch every idea swirling through the air. Mind maps are a creative diagram used to capture the flow of ideas so you don't miss anything. When you mind map, you start with a topic or question related to your problem at the center of the mind map and branch off to include every participant's thoughts. After you get all of your team's ideas out, it's important to reflect on what you've heard. What ideas rose to the top and why? Which ideas worked best together? Which can you use first and which need more fleshing out? Make the most of your brainstorming by answering these questions while the ideas are fresh in your mind. Review and refine your ideas. Now that you have all of your ideas in writing, it's time to review them and strategize about how each of them might have the potential to solve your problem. They need some fleshing out to become alternatives, available possibilities to overcome your problem. The reflection step allows you to debrief as a team and have people prioritize thoughts, comment on their favorite ideas, and ask important questions. The goal of reflection is to capture the top 3 to 5 ideas you just heard. As a problem solver, you'll need to further analyze these options in the implement step of our problem-solving process to identify the one best solution. Here are some steps to take to conclude your brainstorming session. Brainstorming works best if you take the time to prioritize and categorize your ideas right away. As you review all of the ideas in the room, move the most urgent or viable to one area to help them stand out. You can also create clusters of similar or overlapping thoughts, moving post-its into relevant categories or themes while they're still fresh in your team's mind. Ask questions. Have the group think about critical questions about the alternatives that are rising to the top. Why is this a great idea? Who is impacted? What are their needs? Think of all possible angles of the impacts of your ideas. This will ensure you don't miss important considerations as you come up with reasonable alternatives to select. Remember that the goal of brainstorming is to identify 3 to 5 ideas. A great way to accomplish this is to have participants rank the ideas or vote for their favorites during reflection. Have everyone rank each idea or use a small slip of paper to record the rankings with numbers or of some sort of voting system. You could also give each participant a few colored sticky dots, 3 to 5, and invite them to vote for the ones they think will work best. They might choose to cast one vote for each of 3 to 5 ideas or use all their dots on one idea. Ask each person to explain their choices to further flesh out rankings. Then, capture all the idea categories and rankings for your record by snapping a picture or having someone document the ideas in the categories. Follow up. As a courtesy to those who've helped you to brainstorm, be sure to keep them in the loop as you move forward. Alternatives or categories can be processed further in subsequent sessions if needed. Then, report back to participants on what you've been up to in terms of their thoughts as you go. The 3 important steps of the brainstorming process are prepare, brainstorm, and reflect. Step 4 of the problem-solving model is implement, putting one best solution into effect. Moving from brainstorming to implementation is a significant milestone when you're solving a problem. Before you put your one best solution into effect, your goal should be to identify and develop it by evaluating and analyzing each of your alternatives carefully. How will your alternatives compare to one another and which one will stand out? Develop some criteria you can use to assess the merits of each one. Measure the value of available possibilities to overcome your problem. Now that you've generated as many alternatives as you can, evaluate each one carefully. Using objective criteria helps you to avoid making decisions based on emotion or snap judgments. To select a solution from the alternatives you've developed, develop an appropriate way to evaluate them. Is the decision small enough that you can choose intuitively? If not, consider the pros and cons of each alternative and how you can objectively measure them. Select criteria. Evaluation criteria are the variables that drive your decisions. Use more than one of these when evaluating alternatives. Weight your criteria. If your problem is complex, consider all of its dimensions as you evaluate alternatives. However, not all criteria are equally important. To take the difference into account, assign weights to each option. This helps determine how much influence each has on your decision. Rate your alternatives. Rank each based on your criteria and the weight it's assigned, or compare each alternative to the others and determine which is selected the most often. You can use an analytical hierarchy matrix to rate alternatives based on these comparisons. SWOT analysis is a strategic tool that you can use to identify your strongest solution. For each alternative, identify the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to determine which option is your best bet. Consider the strengths and weaknesses to best navigate the opportunities and threats of each alternative. SWOT analysis is a strategic planning exercise that you can use to evaluate a product, project, person, or in this case, a list of alternatives to identify one best solution. SWOT analysis allows you to look at your alternatives in new ways and in new directions. SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, which are defined further here. Strengths and weaknesses are internal to the alternative itself. What about the idea makes it stand out or falter? Opportunities and threats are external things. What's going on outside the problem, relationships, team, organization, environment that contribute to the success or failure of the solution. You can take advantage of opportunities and protect against threats, but you can't change them. Once your SWOT analysis is complete, you can convert your assessment into a strategy. The first step is to look at your strengths and figure out how they can help you take advantage of your opportunities. Then, consider how they can combat the threats you'll be facing. When you take the time to do a SWOT analysis, you'll be prepared with a solid strategy for prioritizing and selecting your alternatives. Choose the best alternatives and use it to develop a solution to your problem. Do not be concerned if the selected alternative isn't perfect. Complex problems rarely have ideal solutions. Make sure that you feel comfortable with the alternative that you choose. Once you've analyzed your choices, get ready to take action. As you implement your solution, think about the real steps you can take and the measures you can use to assess to know if what you've done is working. Propose a course of action guided by a clear vision to achieve meaningful and measurable results. You've discovered a problem, spent time investigating, brainstorming solutions, and weighed the merits of each alternative. Now it's time to trust the work that you've done and make a plan to move forward. A strong action plan maps out the steps you'll take to implement your one best solution. Define actions, performance goals, and set deadlines to give you clarity about your next steps. A simple plan structure to follow includes these components. The outcome. It's the result of implementing your solution. Strong outcomes articulate a clear improvement or define how much improvement will take place. Beginning outcomes with words like increase or decrease helps. Actions are the specific activities you will do to achieve the outcome. Strong actions always start with a verb. For each outcome, consider up to 3 actions. Performance measures. A quantifiable measure of how well each action is working. Different types of measures include quantity, how much did you do, quality, how well did you do it, and impact, is anyone better off? Timeline. It's the date or date range an action will be accomplished. Accountability. The person that's responsible for the action and is accountable for its completion. Recognize that an action plan represents change and people and organizations tend to resist change. Involve members of the team and other stakeholders in the organization to build an agreement that can be sustained as the problem is solved. Successfully implementing a plan will require accountability structures, clear communication, and tracking progress. Step 5. Review assesses the effects of a solution. Throughout the problem-solving process, you've been learning, evaluating, and improving to select the best alternative to put into place. Once you've put the solution into motion, you'll need to plan to find out if it's having the impact you wanted. That's what Step 5, Review, is all about. Most solutions involve choices, tasks, and the participation of others. You can monitor and manage these activities to ensure successful outcomes. This will entail both qualitative and quantitative reflection. Both can lead to important insights into the effects of your solution. Here are 3 ways to review. Qualitative assessment can't easily be measured, but it can be received by asking for feedback from stakeholders. Those who've been involved in your problem-solving journey can give you valuable insight into how your process is working. Gather insights about your solution to evaluate its impact. Conversations are a great first place to measure your solution's success, so engage others to help with your solution. Ask stakeholders and others to monitor changes and watch for problems. Then, follow up with them to see how they think it's going. There are a variety of ways that you can ask for feedback. For individuals or small groups who are close by, a conversation or short meeting is always a great place to start. If you have a large or distant groups to hear from, consider an internet-based survey tool as an effective way to solicit their thoughts. Some of the questions you can ask include, how has your experience changed since the solution was implemented? Has the solution been effective in solving the problem? And what do you think needs to be corrected? As things progress, let people know what's changed and the outcomes you expect so they can observe the right indicators. Also, advise them about what action to take if something seems out of place. Follow up with these observations to keep them aware and interested. Quantitative evaluation can be measured by monitoring your results numerically. What are the facts and figures or statistics that you can track that will help you to be sure that you're achieving the improvements you planned for? Compare results with the intended outcomes to evaluate the success of the solution. Tracking results numerically can be helpful to supplement the qualitative feedback that you've received earlier. It's important that you have a well-defined goal of what data to gather and how you plan to interpret it. Start by returning to your action plan and use that as a measure of quantitative success. Reaching the performance measures and date targets might be a good indicator of early success. Identify key variables. Decide what you can observe to show whether your solution is succeeding or failing. These will often reflect the symptoms of the problem you first identified and should improve as you implement the solution. Decide how often to monitor. Complicated solutions require close contact, while simpler problems need less attention. Budget time for monitoring by asking yourself if the solution requires a full-time commitment, daily activity, or only occasional monitoring. Be persistent. Spend time every day monitoring, managing, and working on the problem. In most cases, it's better to spend an hour or 2 every day managing your project than devoting a full day once a week. Consistency and persistence will contribute to a successful conclusion. By collecting feedback and tracking efficiency and effectiveness, you'll be able to more accurately understand the outcomes of your solution. Then continue to monitor your progress to see if you're having the impact that you're aiming for. Continue to observe your solution in action. Ask yourself important questions about what you've learned and what still needs to be addressed using STAR analysis. Think about the who, what, where, when, why, and how of your solution. Like a reporter trying to discover pivotal information to a story, STAR analysis lets you think about every aspect of your solution and its effects. To complete your STAR analysis, place your main idea at the center of a 6-point STAR diagram. Label each point of the STAR with the who, what, where, when, why, and how. Start with who. Who is the solution benefiting? Who still needs support? Then ask what. What's going well and what still needs to be addressed? Next is where. Where are you seeing the biggest impact and where are there still gaps to fill? Then when. When will monitoring take place and when will you know if you were successful? Why. Why is the solution making an impact and why do you need to make further adjustment? How. How will you know when you've solved the problem and how will you determine if there's more work to be done? STAR analysis is useful because of its exploratory nature. One question triggers another question, and before you know it, you have the beginnings of a solid evaluation within the answers to those questions. Unforeseen complications or issues can cause your solution to go off track. If you detect a problem, it's usually best to make adjustments promptly. When you solve a problem, you and the organization can learn from the experience. Identify what you did correctly and what you might have done differently. You can apply many of the lessons you learn in other problem-solving situations.